You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Reynolds, the owner of 𝒆𝒂𝒕𝒕𝒍𝒆 Northwest, Reynolds & Kline Appraisal, and your host of this episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. We are talking about San Francisco. There's some more stats coming out. San Francisco rents plunge, showing the strain from the pandemic and the wildfire smoke. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is because we have been impacted here as far up on the northwest coast as Seattle with the smoke coming out of California as well. A lot of the smoke has been from Oregon, the Oregon wildfires, but California has just been hammered with the whole smoke thing and then coronavirus. And I did a podcast maybe a week ago, and it was, are the wealthy San Franciscans leaving the city? Because there's a bunch of data showing that there are more and more upper-end units and homes on the market in San Francisco. And now we've got information indicating that their rents have dropped a bunch in the last year. So let's jump on in. The key points on this: rent prices continue to plunge in big U.S. cities last month, with San Francisco leading the decline, according to data from 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂, a real estate startup. I hadn't heard of 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂, but I'm always willing to look at a new thing and see what we got going on. This is a CNBC article, a CNBC post with data from 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂. In September, the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco dropped more than 20% from a year ago to $2,830. So big drop there, 20% in rent in San Francisco. So what do we have going on? And that's kind of what we'll be looking at here. What are the causes behind more inventory on the market, longer days on market for San Francisco, especially the upper end, and then drop in rent as well? And a lot of this is specific just to San Francisco proper. Not necessarily San Jose, not necessarily Oakland, not necessarily some of the surrounding areas, but basically kind of just like downtown Seattle, downtown San Francisco. That seems to be what's being impacted here. All right. And I know on the podcast you can't see the photo, but there was a picture here that just when I saw this picture, I immediately thought, God, that looks like Seattle. And it's a guy having his lunch in 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂. And it's red. The whole, think of like a red filter. This guy is eating his lunch, and in the background you've got 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂, one of the neighborhoods there in downtown San Francisco, and red skies. And we had red skies here in Seattle, maybe 3 days ago, kind of just right towards the end of September. But a couple of weeks ago, we had just terrible smoke and air quality here in Seattle. For one day, I think we had air quality that between Seattle and Portland, some of the worst in the world. But most of that's gotten better. But San Francisco still struggling. We figured out most of this. So the median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco dropped more than 20% from a year ago to $2,830. That's the largest decline the company has recorded. Month to month, the price of a median one-bedroom in the city dropped nearly 7%. So a 7% drop, and then year over year, 20% drop. So are those statistical aberrations? No, probably not, because what we're seeing, that's a rent stat. And then on the sales side, we're also seeing the upper end of the San Francisco market taper off. The podcast I did a week ago, the wealthy San Franciscans leaving, I think the stat there was year over year, they had 1.5% more inventory in the market. Now that sounds just like nothing. That's like not a stat. Nobody cares. Who cares? But when you look at the rest of the country, year over year, a lot of major markets are down 15, 20, 30, sometimes 40% on the mid-tier markets. They have that much less inventory, that much fewer homes on the market than they did a year ago. So to have 1.5% more on the market like San Francisco does right now, there's really something going on. And that's what we're looking at. 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 CEO 𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 to the suburbs to get more space. Yeah, okay, maybe. As the COVID-19 pandemic spurred companies to close offices and allow employees to work from home. Facebook and Google, for example, have told employees they can work remotely at least through next summer. I think Twitter just released a news statement saying they were going to go work from home October 2021. And then another couple of big companies have been like, yeah, let's just do this forever. I don't think that's going to happen, because I think at some point all these companies are going to be like, all right, we've done the preventative thing on the whole Rona, and now we need to kind of get some collaborative efforts going, get the team back together. Let's put the band back together. We need you guys to come into the office 3 days a week, something like that. I think that'll happen second quarter of 2021, which isn't that far away, maybe 6 months from now, somewhere in there. I think you're going to start seeing that, especially if we get a vaccine out. If we get a vaccine out, everybody's like, yeah, let's check that one off. All right, we got to go back to work. We got to start getting more stuff done old school the way we used to, because a lot of CEOs are old, and that's how they want to have things run. All right, so rising unemployment may also be forcing some people into less expensive areas. All right, but in San Francisco, I don't think that is the case. I think you are seeing a real housing trend kind of go on. The wildfires and hazardous air conditions added another incentive and may have tipped the balance about their medium-term location choices. Okay, so the key word here is medium-term location choices. So is that like a couple of years? Short-term to me would be like 6 months, maybe under a year. Medium-term, a year to 2 years, because long-term to me is like having your 5-year plan, right? You got to have a 5-year plan for whatever it is you're doing in life, 5-year plan. And I usually have a 5-year plan for at least housing. That's what I recommend to people is if you can't figure out a 5-year plan for your home, then you've got some uncertainty, and maybe you should be checking out what you're doing. If you have a 1 year or like a 3-year plan, that's on the short end of things, and that is probably not realistic enough. Have a 5-year plan. All right, if the market goes sideways in 5 years, this is what I do. Or if things really take off in 5 years, this is what I want to do. Or I want to have this house for a year, and then I want to do this move, those kind of things. But have it in a 5-year context so you at least actually do some planning. That's a lot of what I work with people, or have worked with people on the appraisal end of things, because a lot of people are like, yep, I'm going to live in this house forever. And then that just doesn't pan out, does it? Something happens. You get divorced, somebody dies, you have that extra kid. God, yeah, we've gone from 3 kids to 4 kids. We need another bedroom. So often that is the case. And then people look at adding on to their homes. Doesn't happen. Have a 5-year plan. That's the bottom line. That is what I'd recommend from Sean the Appraiser. Last month, the air turned dark orange in the city for 1 day as the high-level smoke from the fires turned up and down the West Coast and it blotted out the sun. We had that here in Seattle. It wasn't quite as bad as California, because the fires aren't right here. The smoke is being sent up the West Coast, up into Puget Sound. And so we definitely felt it. But down in San Francisco, I think it's one more reason. The smoke, the air quality down there is, I think it's like in the 500s, just something off the charts terrible. Here in Seattle, I think our worst was maybe like 200. I'm totally guessing on those numbers. I heard those numbers and I was like, oh, California, that sounds terrible. While presenting the data over Twitter, 𝑺𝒂𝒕𝒕𝒍𝒆, he is 𝑺𝒂𝒕𝒕𝒍𝒆 said it. He still has the faith the market will bounce back, although it may take years. I don't think this is a year's thing. I think this is like within this year. I think this will get sorted out by 2021. I really do. I think I'll be doing podcasts in like April that are like, all right, you remember when everybody freaked out about San Francisco having a meltdown? And I told you guys, if you're going to buy in San Francisco, do it. If you're going to buy in downtown Seattle, do it right now. I think we'll be having those conversations in spring of 2021. This thing won't drag out that long. I don't think it takes years. I think it's much shorter than that, and it usually is. And that's just from me seeing these trends happen time after time after time, and then looking at the stats going, wow, that didn't take years. That took months. Despite everything our data is showing, there are so many signals that it will recover, however contrarian this point might sound. He said, however, I think we're talking years to fully recover, not months. I don't think so. I think it's months. Houses in the city are still selling, CNBC reported Sunday. They're just on the market for longer periods of time and not receiving as many bids as they did in recent years. The city reached its highest number of home listings in August at 1,483, and price cuts have become more common. Well, you've got some pretty crazy things going on. San Francisco, one of the biggest tech markets out there, right? And with everybody kind of doing this, we're all going to work from home. I mean, what do you think's going to happen to a market like San Francisco? I'm actually kind of surprised that Seattle hasn't been more impacted by that kind of thing, because even though Seattle hasn't had the forest fires, we've sure had our social fires with CHOP and CHAZ and defunding the police and everything like that. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on the big urban markets just having some pretty major difficult times. And in downtown Seattle, nobody wants to live there. Nobody wants to work there specifically, because right now it's just basically not safe. So you've got these multiple factors going on. And in San Francisco, it's already super expensive to live there. Cost of living, really, really high. You put San Francisco in there with, Seattle's behind it. We're nowhere near where San Francisco is, but we're getting there. You've got London, you've got Sydney, you've got New York. And I think San Francisco, along with New York, are the kind of two major metropolitan areas where you've got prices dropping, you've got longer marketing times for housing, and you've got more inventory on the market, because they've got this whole thing of, and New York specifically had such a coronavirus outbreak, right? I mean, their numbers were just off the charts. So nobody really wants to live there. And that's a gross exaggeration. But if you could get out, you were getting out. And rich people in New York City, Manhattan, done a bunch of podcasts on that. They're out of there. They have enough financial means to, if they need to exit stage left and go somewhere for maybe a short term, maybe 6 months or a year, they go to their house in the Hamptons, right? That's just what they do. San Francisco, same thing. You got some really wealthy people, and I think they're putting their homes on the market because there's a real exodus out of California right now. You've got Ben Shapiro left. You've got Joe Rogan. He just left. Elon Musk from Tesla. We had somebody else just the other day. Who was it? It's a guy wearing a cowboy hat. I can't remember who that was. But you've got some significant people who are like, yep, I'm out of here. I'm going to Texas, or I'm going to Arizona. I'm going somewhere else other than California. And for really upper end wage earners in California, like in San Francisco, you are subjected to the Californian income tax, the state income tax, which is, I think, close to 14%. So you might end up paying like 65% in taxes if you are if you're making some good money in California. That's horrific. I can't blame Joe Rogan with a $100 million deal for leaving California. He was in LA, but just getting out of that state alone. So you've got the income tax situation, you've got wildfires, you've got, it's really already super expensive in San Francisco, and then it's a tech industry, so a lot of those guys and gals can work from home, right? So you've got this perfect storm of, well, maybe we should put our house on the market because there's still not a lot of inventory. Why don't we put our house in the market and see what goes on? Because we're not living here. Nobody wants to live through the forest fires. Nobody wants to live through all of this nonsense if you have money to go elsewhere. And I think that is kind of what you're seeing right now, is you're seeing a short-term people looking around going, man, I just don't really want to deal with this. And we've got enough money. Put this house in the market. If it doesn't sell, whatever, we'll rent it out. But it's not a deal breaker. It's not the end of the line. It's not like the other end of society, which is like, all right, we just lost our $600 stimulus money, lost our federal stimulus money. Maybe some states you're getting the $300 Trump package, but the House just put together I think a $2.2 trillion package. We'll see if that goes anywhere, but I don't have any real faith that that's going to happen before the elections. I don't know. I've seen so many of these packages kind of put together, and both the House and the Senate are just kind of like, oh, here's our package, and the other side's like, oh, here's our package, and they can't seem to work anything out. Because I don't think anybody's convinced that that we really have to have one right now like we did at the beginning of the Rona breakdown, right? That's what's going on. That's what I see happening. So San Francisco really having a tough time, but these numbers to me, these are short-term numbers. So if you have it in your head that you want a really cool condo in downtown San Francisco, if you have it in your head that you want a really cool condo, or just want an apartment living in downtown Seattle, now is your time to do it. And I'm not trying to do that because I'm a shill for the real estate industry and I'm trying to pitch stuff. We've got listings in Seattle that are slow. And to me, I'm just kind of looking at it going, if this was the market you're in for, and if your job is in downtown Seattle anyway, this is a pretty good deal. You're not going to see this. This is your buy on the dip. This is your opportunity to get into something that makes sense if that is your lifestyle. But so many people are saying, oh my gosh, with the Rona, we don't want to live in downtown. We don't want to be close to other people. That's going to go away. We're going to get a vaccine. All this stuff will go away and we'll be 6 months down the road. Remember when you could get a condo for XYZ? Wow, that was a really genius move. Should have done that. That's the shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? So those are my predictions that I think these are short-term numbers. And wildfires, yeah, whether they're the result of global warming or not, they're happening in San Francisco and California, just having a difficult time. I kind of feel like Seattle is out of the woods on a lot of this stuff. We just need a vaccine to kind of get back to some normalcy. I spoke with an Uber driver yesterday. I was headed over into downtown Seattle, not downtown Seattle, but East Lake, Seattle. And she was saying that it's still very slow. There just aren't enough people running around doing things. People aren't going out to restaurants where they need a ride back. They're not doing business meetings. They're not traveling in from out of state. They're not traveling in from even out of city into SeaTac. And that's a lot of what Uber's business is SeaTac. It's airport traffic. It's people going places. So I do my best to try and take an Uber once or twice or maybe 3 times a week, depending on what else I've had going on the evening before, or I got to leave my car somewhere. But yeah, I like to support Uber. That's my thing. Not Lyft, but Uber. I don't know why. Maybe because I find the app super easy to deal with. It's just you punch up a ride and it's there in a few minutes and you go home. You give them a 5-star rating. That's all you got to do. All right. So San Francisco, I think there's some good opportunities there. Also downtown Seattle, good opportunities there. Manhattan, I don't know. I just don't know that market well enough to be able to make predictions there. But as I've got more information on this kind of thing, on what we've got going on with San Francisco, I will let you know right here on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode here on the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Love to have you subscribe if that's your thing. If not, all right, maybe on the next one. How about that? All right. That's it for me. I'm Sean Reynolds from Summit Properties Northwest, Reynolds & Kline Appraisal. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.